Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, Jeremy, National Fire Radio, back on the podcast today. A very special guest, and frankly, I think long overdue, sir. Long overdue. Kyle Romagus. Kyle, thanks for joining me, man. It's great to have you on.
Man, I'm stoked to be here, dude.
This is cool. Your message is strong. It's powerful. Your delivery comes with quite a snap to it, bro. I sat through one of your classes recently down in Little Rock at the First In Conference, and that was the first time that I've been exposed to your classroom teachings. I've seen you on the fire ground. I've seen you pushing lines, flowing water, but your presence in the classroom and something about you that just stands out is, frankly, no bullshit. This is like information. It's vetted information, and you are passionate about it, and your delivery comes across as just in your face and non-apologetic. And I love that. I absolutely love that about your approach.
Yeah, I really like delivering that class. That was an hour, 45-minute version of a 4-hour class. So, like, just
right.
You being in that condensed version is probably why you got, in-your-face material, because that's about all the time I had was just facts after facts after facts.
We get, you teach a lot. I've this year I've been teaching a lot, and a lot of times they want you to teach your class, but they condense it down, which makes it very hard, right? Because I know for me to get my message across, you have to build to the talking points. And so you're 100% right, man. You take a 4-hour class and throw it in an hour and three-quarter. You're hitting it hard fast.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I usually explain it to people like, imagine if you're reading your favorite book, like the one you've read multiple times, you just can't put it down. And then I ask you to rip out chapters 2, 4, 9, 12, and 13,
yeah, right.
And then reread the book. And it's like, man, things don't touch anymore, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, man. That's a really good way to put it. And it's something you said, I want to dive right into it. I want the new guy to know the nozzle position before pushing a mop and bucket.
Yeah, for
Bang.
sure.
Bang. Go deep on that.
Like
I want to explore that. Let's go.
Yeah, especially like on a 3-man engine was where I grew up. So I've never had anything over a 3-man engine. And on a 3-man engine, like most people know, you got a company officer, you got a driver, and you got a guy that works for a living in the back. And that dude in the back, he is usually the probie. So when you're throwing the probie on a hand line and you're putting the supervising officer 2 to 3 pinch points away from him every fire you go to, you got to make sure that dude knows how to think. So, like, there's some very serious conversations that need to happen before we get into the janitorial aspect of this job, So I want him to be able to make decisions in absence of me, and being able to do that is trying to figure out what he knows, what he doesn't know, what he learned from the fire academy, the Grand Canyon that exists between those two, and then trying to fill in those gaps as early as possible.
Well, I'll be honest with you. That message, when you said that, I took pause, man. I sat back in my chair and I go, there's so much validity to that, because too often our priorities are skewed and we're looking at the nonsense instead of the actual mission of this job. And without putting water on that seat of the fire, we ain't doing our job, right? So that's job number one, cleaning the floor, the bay floor, washing the trucks, number 2, right? I mean.
Yeah, it's all part of the gig, man, but we want to, especially in a busy department, you want to be able to cross the Rubicon with these guys early. And, like, we can pick up slack in the station, but one thing that really would help is if the training division realizes that there's a gap in between what they have and what they need, and then being able to structure the probie program to try to fill in those gaps as fast as possible. But the majority of the training divisions in American Fire Service, unfortunately, are staffed by people who either A, can't cut it in the street, or B, don't want to be in the street. So, I mean, it's hard to get that crossover into that mind frame, especially like large urban city fire departments. If you're at a large urban city fire department and you are going to work, the last thing you want to do is stop going to work, So it's hard to get those dudes in the training division.
I agree with you, right? And I just had asked you, I said, Battalion Chief of Training, you said no longer, I'm back on the street. And then I asked you, well, what did that look like? And, you talked to me about how you got into the training division. And for somebody that runs a training company that teaches nationally, you would just think that that's where you belong in a way, right? It's like you're really affecting change and setting guys on the right trajectory from the get when you're able to get them from day one.
Yeah, it was a fun experience. I did it for about 4.5 years. I'm glad I did it. You know, I used to teach basic fire academy as well. I taught the basic fire academy in Texas for 5 years. And then it just got to a point to where I got tired of teaching the book, man. And then when I got tired of teaching the book, I started teaching the street nationally, you know, and that's essentially where I've had the biggest effect, I think, is being able to bring the street to the folks. It's tough to do in the academy mindset.
I think you're 100% right, but where does your experience come from then? That's what I'm really curious about, because when the information you were giving out was solid. I mean, just I could tell by the numbers, the information you have, your positioning, the way you talked about your insights and knowledge comes from experience. So give me a little background on your upbringing and the experience that you gained along the way, man.
So in East Montgomery County, we have a habit of running the same fire over and over and over again. You know, like we're not a department that's full of commercial building fires and apartment fires and high-rise fires. You know, like the single-family dwelling fire is the majority of what we run. And in my 16 years as an engine captain, we were able to run a lot of them. You know, so, and I try to tell people all the time, like, we were able to run the same fire over and over and over again and then change one thing about it. You know, like change where water was placed, when it was applied, how much water was there. We went through several different flow rates at East County. You know, so like when you're able to have that repetitive nature, you start to pick up on some things.
Well, I love that. I mean, how often do you get to go to the same fire and over? Because you could just tweak those little things, right? And when you have the ability to just tweak those little things and you see a different outcome, you can then figure out your sandbox, right? Like you get to dial in on what works. I fucking love that. That's awesome. I think, though, how dynamic the fire service is, though, a lot of people would struggle with that, though, when they listen to you, because they think like, well, this guy's going to the same fires over and over. And so what he's preaching here probably wouldn't work here or might not work here. What would you say to that?
Well, I mean, there's some known knowns on it's just a fire in a box, man. You know, like when you can break it down to a point to where it's so simplistic that, you know, you may be going to fires in, Kentucky or California or Canada or Germany, but at the end of the day, you're going to a fire in a box. You know, like if you can break the system down into the most simplistic nature that you can, now we can start attacking the commonalities that are between us instead of the variables, right? So like the most common variables in the fire service are going to be the weather outside, what you brought, and how you use it. You know, those are the most common variables we have. And if we can push those variables to the side so we can have a simplistic conversation about the fire in a box, there are some truths that don't matter what you feel about it and what you or your personal experiences are. Truths are truths, man. They're known knowns. And then when you're going to a fire in a box, man, there's some known knowns about where you're going to put water, how you're going to place water, at what point does water need to be elevated, what point does water need to be at the solid fuel level. You know, like there's some consistent truths across that spectrum that don't change no matter where you are.
That's pretty solid. Why do we overcomplicate it then? I mean, if you think about it, if it's as simple as putting water in a box, right, fighting fire in a box, why the hell are we overcomplicating this job?
Well, I think there's a lot of variables that the fire service have added in to make things complex, unfortunately. You know, like the fire service is cyclical, man. Like we went away from the high pressure, lower volume lines into the lower pressure, higher volume lines. You know, like we're just going back in time. You know what I mean? So like, especially on the engine side, you know, attack packages are going back in time over the last 15 years or so. You know, now the solid bore is now gaining traction again. It's low pressure, high volume, large droplet. You know, like I've been really enjoying watching the fire service from afar and also being involved in the national circuit and everything that's coming out from UL and NIST and everything that's been coming out since the late 90s, you know, when they started Governor's Island. It's just confirming what the old heads already did. You know what I mean? Like, and we had a bad habit as the fire service as overcomplicating this job. You know, we're putting in variables where we should have been putting constants in. And then we did it to ourselves, man. You know, like, and it's nice to see a resurgence of simplicity.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there. Have you always had this simplistic approach to things in life? Like even as a kid and like growing up, early years in the fire service, did you really have an understanding of like breaking things down and looking for a simpler approach?
Man, I've tried to. I think simple's better. You know, it's always been in my mind frame that simplicity reigns supreme. You know, especially in high stress situations. You know, like I got into the fire service right after high school, and I've known nothing but the fire service since I like matured, I guess you could say. You know, so like I guess the mind frame of simplicity has been in the forefront of my mind frame because I only know high stress situations from a young age. You know, and once you start overcomplicating things in a high heart rate, things start to fall apart. You go back to lizard brain anyway. You know, like so the most simpler we can keep it,
Right.
the better off we'll be.
Lizard brain. I love that. I heard you refer to that a few times when you were talking, and it cracked me up, man. That's a really good approach to what you're talking about. I think this overcomplication of what we do gets in the way, and I think that's where it gets confusing. And sitting through and watching you teach and talk about the information, I know, and I've seen you do it. I've seen you go super deep and super detailed into a lot of information that can overwhelm people, right? And I think what a good thing is for an instructor or somebody that teaches is to really have such a depth of knowledge, but they understand how to deliver it in a clear and simplistic way. And I'm guessing that's how you learned along your career, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that came from delivering basic fire academy knowledge for the 5 years that we talked about earlier. So like, yeah, I spent 5 years delivering information in a deep dive, trying to package information to where I could throw it against the wall and make it stick to a probie that has no mind frame about the fire service at all. You know, like you're getting them with pretty much no experience in the academy, and being able to develop a delivery method for that aided me going forward. You know what I mean? So like, the easiest way that I can explain it is that I try to explain everything as deep as I can get it, but also deliver it in a way that if I was talking to a kindergartner, he would understand it. You know what I mean? Like break it down so simple that it's hard to argue. And I try to tell people all the time, you got to kind of play chess with people. So like if I'm trying to say, for instance, convince you of a tactic, I have to first play chess with you and get you to agree to some things that you don't necessarily know you're agreeing to yet. And then we can come back with the crescendo. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, there's an art form there, and you know, it's not just teaching, but also being a company officer, right? And you were a company officer, then you're a battalion chief in training, and now you're a battalion chief back on the road, and that's that educational buy-in. Let's find common ground, and then I'll push you a little bit further to understand and come along, and that takes skill, bro. That's not easy for a lot of people, and I think that's where a lot of the disconnect is. I really believe that. Talk to me about Black Fire. You went hard on that in your class, and I don't think it's talked about enough. So go deep on that for me. Explain what Black Fire is and your perspectives on it.
So essentially, Black Fire is a term that kind of developed over time from my research, at least. I'm a super nerd, so I'll read things going all the way back to the 1800s with Braidwood, and you know, like Braidwood was talking about Black Fire in the 1800s. London Fire Brigade.
It's wild.
You know, so like, it's not a new topic, but it's one of those, going back to what we were just talking about, it's a way that I can get people to start agreeing to some stuff without agreeing to it yet. So like, if I can get you to a point to where you understand what Black Fire is, which is underventilated conditions, highly flammable atmospheres with high heat but low oxygen. If I can get you to the point to where you can agree that Black Fire, number one, exists, and we all pretty much got to that point in 2025 now. Like, it's not a unknown portion of what we do. It's made it into the curriculums, you know, how disappointing they are. That's at least got that right, you know. But if I can get you on board with underventilated fires being an issue, there's only 3 ways that we can really battle underventilated fires as an engine company, right? So, like, if we just break it down to the bare bones and simplistic nature, like we talked about earlier, the 3 sides to the fire triangle are fuel, heat, and oxygen. So like in the situation with more than 50% of the space filled with black turbulent smoke, that Black Fire has taken over the spaces that were in the boxes. At that point, we only have 3 options, which is either starve it of oxygen, we can take the fuel away, or we can reduce the temperature of that fuel below its ignition temperature, right? And as the engine company, we really only have one option. So, like, if I can get you to the point to agree that black fire exists, number one, in a situation where black fire exists more than 50% of the space, then I can get you on board with the building being occupied by unprotected civilians until we say it's not. Now we have black fire and unprotected civilians. So once we're on board with all of that, now I can start moving you towards the flow and move aspect. Because as the engine company, I can't take the richness out of the fuel. Never. Only the truck company can, lift and lean out of the top. I can't return that fuel back to a state of unoxygenated because there's people inside the building until we say there's not. So there's really one option. And the one option is to return that fuel below its ignition temperature. And there's only one tool in the fire ground that can do that. You know what I mean?
I do. I think I wonder about the old myth of you don't open up on smoke, right? And I think about what's burning today in our boxes, right? And the fuel loads that we're going to and how snotty these fires are on arrival compared to what they used to be, even in just our years, being on, right? You're 20 plus years in. I got a few more than that. But like, even to see the dynamic of the fires change just in those 20 to 30 years has greatly been different. So we have to re-educate ourselves and make sure that our message is true. I love the idea of black fire. And what I enjoyed about it when you were talking about it was how you break down the simplicity of over 50%, under 50%, right? Talking about, if you are truly talking about a box and then breaking it down to look at the ratio within that box can help you make decisions quickly, no?
Yeah. Then it's all about cause and effect, conditions drive tactics. And then I don't know if you noticed or not, but you didn't get the full 4-hour version. But in the full 4-hour version of Cruel Intentions, all my classes, I try to build it like a story. Like I'm telling you a story. You know what I mean? Like, so the very beginning of the story is the introduction of the story where I lay the groundwork of all these issues that we have as the engine company. Whether that's hose design or nozzle reaction or flammable atmospheres that we find ourselves in the box. Then I take you through past NIOSH reports of black fire that have turned out unfortunate for some people, and then at that point I start bringing you back into the resolution mindset of it. Like, how can we fix this problem? And once you get down to that and being able to convince folks that conditions drive tactics, you now have to teach them how to think. You know what I mean? Like, you have to add context because it's not always flow and move. It's not always hit and move. It's if this, then this. And in order to get somebody to the point to where I can say, if this, I'm going to do that. And if this, I'm going to do that. You got to bring context in the situation. So like visual context is the easiest way to do that with the young guy. I'm going to see this, so I'm going to do this. And being able to bring that context in will start filling that Rolodex of that dude up that he doesn't have. Because he's got 0 Rolodex when he comes out of the fire academy. And then at that point, when he starts seeing things in the street that can start filling in those blanks, that's when his Rolodex starts to fill up. But on a 3-man engine, I don't have time for that. Like, I got to fill your Rolodex up from the time I meet you until the time, because like, you could go your whole career and never make an underventilated fire. You can go your whole career without making a wind-driven fire. Or you could make that fire tonight. And on a 3-man engine company, we've got to be able to solve some of those problems before we get to that point.
What is what does it look like to be a backstep guy for Kyle Romagus?
I've had a few. Thankfully, I was a probie machine for a long time. So, like, for about 12 years or so, I just got probie after probie after probie. And then the majority of those guys are now company officers, which is awesome for me because I've been able to build legacy. Cool.
Sure.
But I struggled early in my career. And then I went overboard, like the pendulum swung too far, 14-hour days with these dudes and putting in work all day. And then I kind of finally settled back into a happy medium. But it was a struggle for some of those dudes for sure, because you want to give them all of what you got, you know what I mean? And not having before I got in the training division, there wasn't a real structured probie program to an extent that I thought it could be. So, like, I had to find myself filling in gaps all the time. Like, there was a structure, and there was like a table of contents, I guess you could say, but there was no body. You know what I mean? Like, and then I found myself giving them too much information. up front, making 10,
Overwhelming.
14-hour days. Yeah, for sure. So I had to find a happy medium in there.
But that's who you are, though, right? Because you said you're all in. You're reading books from the 1800s. I mean, you live and breathe this, right? So finding that balance then of being able to work with the new kids and build them up to a point, that's hard. That's hard. Yeah. What was your inspiration early on when you came in? Did you have mentors that were intense? Like you? I mean, Kyle, I'm not gonna lie. Like I would use the word intense when I describe you, right?
Yeah.
I would, right? And I don't mean that in any negative way. I just think it's somebody that's super passionate about what he talks about. And the fact is that what you talk about is what you know. And that's called conviction, right? And people can be intimidated by that, right? And so I think about then, I always like the backstories of like, well, how the hell did Kyle Romagus get to where he is today? So what did your early days look like? Did you have mentors that were intense and all in with you? Or has East Montgomery changed over the years?
We've changed over the years. I didn't really have a whole lot of mentors that were into the job. Like there was a lot of mentors coming up that were really good at the job, but not really into the job. Does that make sense? So like They were doers, but they weren't showers. You know what I mean? Like, so it took me, diving down rabbit holes and trying to figure out why I wasn't good at, because I wasn't good at this job when I got into it. You know what I mean? Like I sucked at this job. Like there was a lot of fires that went horribly early in my career, and I didn't have a whole lot of mentor. We're not a large organization, so like there wasn't a whole lot of guys that I could pull from, be like, hey man, let me explain this fire to you and why it went poorly. Tell me what I did wrong. There was nobody like that. You know what I mean? So like I had to struggle through a massive library to try to dig deep to figure out, number one, what I was doing wrong, and number two, what I should be doing. You know what I mean? Like, and everything that I found going back and I really enjoyed the dive into pre-SCBA. That really started to open my eyes is when I started reading pre-SCBA tactics and then pre-SCBA mindset. That really grabbed my attention because, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody in the building but us is pre-SCBA. You know what I'm saying? It's like, surprise, surprise. It's better for the unprotected civilian as if we also operate as if we're unprotected. So, like, that kind of shaped my mindset going into this journey was trying to
Where did you find that?
Out. I mean, Warren Kimball, William E. Clark, Harold Rickman, James Braidwood, Leo Stapleton, Emmanuel Freed.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of resources out there. They're kind of hard to find unless you know what you're looking for, but I started my journey with novels like the Jake from Leo Stapleton and the Lou and, moving through novels, Dennis Smith, Engine Company 82, and then started looking through and really here's a real good trick for those that are looking for this kind of stuff is look through bibliographies of your favorite articles. So like the majority of your articles that you find very knowledge base and very informational, look through the bibliography at the very bottom and you'll start seeing some common threads there. And then you can start pulling on those threads and then diving down deep even further.
That is such a great tip, dude. I've never even thought of that. I love that. I always talk about like, look at who you're, if you read somebody's content, look who they're friends with, look who they hang out with, who are they having conversation with. That vets people for me right away. But I never thought about looking at the bibliographies of articles and other books where people are referencing their content. That's a great idea, dude. I love that.
Yeah.
So you said early on then you weren't doing it right, but you fought for it. I mean, you could have rolled over and been like, fuck it. 25 years, I'm out. Like, I could be substandard. I could be average. What is it about Kyle Romagus that was like, no, I want to be better at this job? What job kicked you in the teeth hard enough that you were like, this doesn't work for me?
Oh man, I would say the majority of them early in my career.
Really?
I got my I got my teeth kicked in a lot early in my career, man. But I mean, we didn't have mentors. We just were doing it. You know what I mean? Like there was nobody there to coach us. We were just reactionary. You know what I mean? And then thankfully early in my career, we were very busy. And then like you have to really start doing some internal reflection and try to figure out what your level of success is. You know what I'm saying? So like your internal level of success, is it that the fire went out and everybody that came on your rig went back to the firehouse? Or did you start really dialing in what actually occurred there? And once I started filming fires, like with my helmet cam and with GoPros, that was really when I started to pick up on a little thing here or there. You know what I mean? Like just grabbing, you know, helmet cam footage from myself or helmet cam footage from somebody else that was in the building, and just start seeing different things occur in the different places, and then really starting to nerd out on what actually occurred there. You know, so like anybody that would tell you that they were fantastic at this job all the way through their career, they're probably lying to you, number one. Or they grew up in an organization that didn't ride a 3-man engine. They probably had senior men on the back. They were able to coach their decisions, or their level of work was so limited that they didn't have a chance to put in enough to figure out where their downfalls are. You know what I mean? Like, you put in enough work, you're going to find out where your weaknesses are.
Oh, no doubt. In the 3-man engine thing, because here's the deal. At the end of the day, whether you have a 5-man engine, 6-man engine, or a 3-man engine, the same work has to get done.
Yeah.
Right? We don't get to make an excuse. I only got 3 guys. Well, that means those 3 guys have to work harder usually, right? And so we don't get to back down. And I think that's what I loved about what you had said was I need them to know the nozzle position before they learn anything else, right? Let's prioritize what this job truly is all about.
Yeah, in most organizations, they'll try to mimic what they see as successful from the large organization that's in close proximity. You know, like Houston is very close to us. So, like, I'm 2 mutual aid districts from the city of Houston, which is like the 4th, I think it's the 4th largest fire department in the country now. You know, and we tried to do what they do for a long time. And I can't do with 9 what they can do with 65. Like, there's nowhere to hide on the fire ground. You know what I mean? Like, with 65 dudes showing up to your house fire, then if there's 10 firemen there and 55 that are just there spectating, the fire goes well. You know, so, like, we tried to do what they did for a long time, and then we started watching sunrises over smoke plumes and figured out that we can't do what they do, you know? So like, we had to figure out what was beneficial for us with limited manpower, because the only thing you could do with less is less. So I don't have, you know, 20 guys that I could just throw into the living room, just tell them to roll around a little bit and get the fire out, right? Like, so we had to 100%. Really start analyzing what we do and how we did it.
And what did that look like for you guys then? What were some of those changes, or how do you operate today? What does that look like?
The biggest change was in our attack packages. So we were all engines since 1962 until 2020. So it was all engines all the way through the fire department. Our first ladder company was installed in 2020. So like, we're still in that infancy stage of separating engine and truck mentality, because we all did truck work. We just did it off the engine, you know? So like, orders were given out on the fire ground by necessity, not arrival. So like, depending on how you arrived and what the conditions in the building required is what orders you would get on the fire ground. So like, we had to be good at everything, which means that we weren't good at anything. You know what I mean? Like, so
I get it.
We couldn't specialize anything, you know what I mean? And then now we're at a point to where we have a specialty companies, and we can start isolating some of that work and specializing some of those training opportunities in that direction. But still, we're in the infancy stage of that. You know, but the biggest change for us was our attack package. So we went from high pressure automatic fog nozzles with no idea of gallonage of what we were actually flowing, because we were all stupid. You know what I mean? Like, we never knew what we did. We never had flow meters on the rigs, and then it started diving down deep. And I'm like, okay, so the very first article that really started me diving down deep was Camella's article in Fire Nuggets. Like, when you're designing an attack package, what does that look like? You know, like, how do we start testing some of these variables on the fire ground that we have and turn them into constants? You know, and my fire chief now, he was a captain back then, really spearheaded the change in our attack packages, from the automatic to the constant gallonage nozzle, which is the low pressure smoothbore that we have now. You know, he was the first one that ever put the 7/8 on the rig. And then we were all kind of not familiar with the change that he was trying to make. He dove down the rabbit hole way before we did. You know, and it was one of those things, like in small organizations, he would change the attack package when he was on shift and then pull it off when he was off.
Yeah, right.
You know, like, and none of us really knew what was going on their fires until we started asking questions like, hey, man, why are you pulling that hose load off every day? Why don't you just leave it up there? And it's like, well, I mean, if you want it up there, let's have a discussion about it. And then I started going down rabbit holes, and from there, really learning that I didn't know enough about this job, you know, and the more I read, the more I realized I didn't know. You know, so like, and it was just a
how long ago
struggle.
was this? How long ago was this when your department went through this?
Early 2000s, probably 2009, 2010. So it's been about 15 years or so.
So the amount of information that's available today wasn't there 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was there. It just wasn't easily accessible. You know, like I try to tell people now, like everything's at your fingertips. You don't have to wait on the mailbox anymore. Like for you to be uninformed about this job in 2025 is negligence. Like you are literally keeping yourself in a cave. So like now the information is so readily available. Then
that's exactly my point, right? That's why I was kind of leading you there with that, because, you know, back then you had to go seek this information. You had to do the work yourself. Today, you don't really need to reinvent the wheel. There is so much opportunity at your fingertips. Not only that, but you can communicate and talk with people so quickly these days to determine what they're using, why they use it. I mean, Attack Patch, I am happy to say, I think we've evolved greatly in education when it comes to understanding our flows more than ever today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to get away with unknown unknowns. Like Dennis will talk about, you got known knowns, you've got unknown knowns, and you've got unknown unknowns. Does that make sense? So like now at this point in 2025, there's not many unknown unknowns anymore. Like the resources are so readily available. You either know that you don't know it or you know that you know it. You know what I mean? So like it's hard for you to be uninformed unless you're just trapped in your territorial bubble, which a lot of people are.
Yeah, well,
and especially like urban city fire departments.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I think we're at that point now where you don't get to say the unknown. Like that doesn't exist anymore. It is, everything is out there and it's available for you to have right at your fingertips. You have to go look for it maybe, but it's available to you. There's really no unknowns anymore out there that we've never seen before. Yeah, that's exciting. So what are you working on today? What are we doing in Kyle Romagus with the Smoothbore Cartel and Engine Company Resurrection? I mean, your plate is full, sir. So what's got you up at night? What rabbit holes are you diving down today?
Actually trying to start a ride a little bit. I haven't published anything anywhere ever. That's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Is that right?
Yeah. I've never published anything. I've never sent anything in. And now I was just in San Antonio with Champo, and every time I'm with Champo, he's like, man,
of course,
give me 500 words.
Right.
Give me 500 words. Just give me some bullet points. You know, I'm trying to put some stuff on paper, man, but it's tough, dude. Like, I get people asking me all the time, like, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write this? And it's like, man, my book would be Warren Kimball's book. It would be William E. Clark's book. It would be the book of Dunn. It would be James Braidwood. It'd be Andy Fredericks, Jay Camella. You know what I mean? So it's tough for me to put things on paper because I feel that I didn't write any of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the hardest part. So, like, I tried to write an article for the Book of Search, and a lot of people don't know this story, so I'll tell this story here. So, like, I was supposed to write an article for the Book of Search on Victim on the Nozzle, and I wrote it, like, 7 or 8 times, and I just kept throwing it away. Like, I get 500 words down, and I'll be like, man, this is garbage. I just throw it away. And then I get, like, 1,000 words down on paper, and I'm like, man, all this has already been written. You know what I mean? So, like, what can I write that hasn't been written already? And it's hard for me because I'm so well read into it that, like, I pick up everything from every other author that ever wrote for the fire service. I try to tell dudes all the time, if you got on this job after 1960, you didn't make none of this up. Like, none of it. We're all just standing on the shoulders of giants, man. Yeah. So, like, it's tough for me with internal reflection to put anything on paper. But I'm struggling right now.
But you just said it before, though. There's no more unknown unknowns. So, of course, what you're writing was probably influenced by others, but there's nothing wrong with that because you're putting your own experience and knowledge on top of what you've read and how you've been guided along your career, and you can put the Kyle Romagus spin on it. That is still original. It's just rooted in foundational beliefs that you abide to, right? So there's nothing wrong with that, sir.
Yeah, it's just tough for me because the hard part is just for me because I'm well read. Like me reading the words that I put on paper, I'm like, you didn't write none of that. You know, like this is all stuff that you read. But knowing that 75% of the fire service that's going to read that is not well read, or they're going to not know where it came from. You know what I'm saying? That's why I struggle with. They think they're going to come for me.
Yeah, and what I would challenge you is this: that's your style. I mean, just in this episode in the last 30 minutes, you've mentioned the same names over and over again. Those are certainly mentors of yours, whether you've even met them or not, right? Some you couldn't have, right? But like they are mentors of yours, but maybe your writing style includes the influences of your mentors and saying, if you don't know where this is coming from, I need you to go back to step one before you even get here. But I do believe that you have a lot to offer and your information is tight and it's based on your own experience, but it's coupled with the knowledge that you've read from others. And I think that there is an absolute place for that. I believe that, man. I think you got a lot in front of you, and I think you shouldn't shy away from it for sure. It's still yours. It's still yours.
I'm trying, man. Yeah. Camp always messes with me when I see him. So every time I see him, it's like, just give me a legal pad, 500 words. Will make you sound fantastic. Like,
yeah, well, there's a lot to that, right? And I think that you have the ability to do so. I think you're very well read, and typically those that are well read write very well. So, do you keep journals for yourself?
I used to. You know, when I was an engine captain, I kept a journal. So I kept a journal for about a decade or so of fires. And then when I started to get into, when the iPhone came into our life, I started to do voice-to-text notes. So, like, after a fire or after an incident, I just kind of spend 15, 20 minutes in reflection, you know, and that was really cool for a while. I wish more people would. I wish that I would have earlier in my career, right? Yes. And that's usually what I tell young firemen is the biggest piece of advice I'd give you is start journaling right now. You know, like, just write down weird things that happen to you on fires. You know, and I wish more people would do that. One of the things that I really hate that left the fire service in my area, at least, is the logbook. So like in large urban organizations, you can go back, you know, decades and read the logbook about, basically they were journaling without journaling. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
how many bales of hay was fed to the horses? I've seen it, you know, it's freaking cool, man. It's very cool, right? They refer to the horses by name when they're talking about them. You're like, what? Ran down the street, right? I mean, it's hilarious. But that stuff matters, right? The traditional routing of our fire service, those are the things that I love, because you got to understand what's come before you, how you cite authors and people that have changed your game. I mean, you know, how educated you are today and what fuels you are the readings of those that wrote yesterday. I mean, that's freaking awesome. I love that.
Yeah, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, man. And, like, I wish more people were well-read in NIOSH as well. So, like, we don't come up with new ways to kill ourselves, man. We just perfect the old ones. So, like, if more people were well-read into NIOSH reports and what has occurred on the fire ground, and the unfortunate part about that particular topic is that we don't read close calls. We don't have any, like, there's not a huge list of close call descriptions. They're only direct hits, right? So, like, if you could read the hundreds of thousands of close calls that have occurred over the years and maydays that almost resulted in a line of duty death, I think that would tell a better story than the NIOSH reports that we do have, you know, but I wish more people were well read into NIOSH. And then now who knows where that's going now, because NIOSH has been disbanded. But.
Yeah, right now, yeah. That's interesting. You got my brain spinning on that one, sir. That's something I have never thought. I mean, I do a lot of thinking, and I think about a lot of different opportunities that are in the fire service. That's one I haven't thought about. And there's something there, man. That's a really good point. Well taken. Well taken. Let's go. All right, let's get nerdy again, because people love hearing Kyle Romagus go talk fire and talk strategy, tactics, and so on. 2.5 gallons equals 1 second.
Yeah.
Go deep on that. That was something else I picked up in your class. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, 150 gallons a minute is 2.5 gallons a second. So, I mean, if you can break it down into gallons per second, and that's something I got from Kurt, you know, it really kind of gets your mind frame going into how much water we're actually flowing. You know, so, like, if you think about the NFA fire flow formula, and I don't know if you want to go down this road, you know, but, like, the NFA fire flow formula and how it came to be, we can just reverse that to get line selection. You know, so, like, the NFA fire flow formula has a tendency to overwhelm people just due to the fact that you have to adequately calculate square footage at 3 a.m. You know what I mean? So, like, if I could adequately calculate square footage on an empty house in the daylight with no, stressors involved, that's great. But like, what about 3 o'clock in the morning when, mom rips you out of the pumper and you got black and orange blowing out of the top of it? Can we have one chance to get the first line right? So getting in that same mindset, like we can just simplify it even more. Going back to what we were talking about, it's like simplification of the fire service. So like if I have 3 flows on my engine, which is 150 gallons or 160 gallons, depending on where you fight fire, 250 to 300 on 2.5, and then 600 to 1,000 on your deck gun, which is usually what people are going to go. So like East County, we've got 160, 300, and 600. Those are our 3 flow rates for initial fire attack. So like if I can break down the NFA fire flow formula backwards, I just do GPM times 3 equals square footage. You know what I'm saying? So like at the point where I'm looking at a building, like residential structures in my district are on average 2,000 square feet. So 1,000 square feet on the bottom, 1,000 square feet on top. So like instead of me calculating square footage of fire load, I can get a rough average of everything in my district. And then I figured out through Zillow and real estate apps and walking through master development communities that 2,000 is a rough average. We've got outliers of 800 square foot. We've got outliers of 5,000 square feet, but on average, it's going to be 2,000.
The bread and butter.
Now, with that knowledge base, if I pull up and I see a quarter of the building on fire versus a half of the building on fire versus all of the building on fire, it makes line choice a little bit easier. So like 160 times 3 is 480. 480 sounds real close to 500.
500.
Quarter of 2,000 is 500. So if I'm looking at a quarter of the building on fire, pull the inch 3/4. So 300 times 3 is 900. 900 is real close to 1,000. So if I'm looking at half the building on fire, pull 2.5. 600 times 3 is 1,800. 1,800 is real close to 2,000. So if I'm looking at the entire building on fire, then the deck gun's an easy choice. And if we break it down even simpler than that, we can go down to gallons per second. So like gallons per second on 150 gallons a minute is 2.52 gallons a second. 160 gallons a minute is 2.6 gallons a second. So like when I'm trying to build the mind frame and like doing that pre-work on the front end, trying to get them to a point, because like the most common thing that people say about flow and move is that we use too much water. And it's like, well, if we break it down into seconds, how much water are we actually using? You know what I mean? And like, if we can get it down to 10 seconds per box, that's only 25 gallons a box. So if we're looking at a room on fire on the Alpha Bravo corner, let's say 10 by 10 bedroom is the most majority of the average 10 by bedroom size in America in the sub, so 10 by 10 bedroom. So like Alpha Bravo corner, 10 by 10 bedrooms, 1 box. Hallways, 25 feet, let's say that's 2 boxes. And then the living room would be 3 to 6 boxes, depending on what kind of living room you got there. So if we've got a fire that took over the Alpha Bravo bedroom, spread into the hallway, took the hallway over, and is pouring out the front living room door at the front entrance like a waterfall, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes. So if we've got 8 boxes on fire and it's 25 gallons a box, that's 200 gallons. So like, how many fire engines do you have in America that have less than 200 gallons on them? You know what I'm saying? So like, if you've got 500 gallons on your urban city fire engine, you can easily handle 1 room of fire that's extended to the hallway and then come out the front door. So you don't need water until you use water. So that's the old adage of the first dude laying in. It's like, what's better for the unprotected civilian, right? So we even go back further. We came a long way from gallons per second here, but that's just kind of how this argument goes down. If we can all agree that there's people inside the building until we say they're not, what would they most benefit by? Me making a fire attack first due or me laying in first due? You know what I'm saying? Or allowing second due to come provide me booster tank backup. So now I have 1,000 gallons, and then allowing third due water supply. You know what I'm saying? So this goes a long way from gallons per second, but it all ties together in the big spider web. But 2.5 gallons a second, if we can get to that point, now we can start realizing that we have more water than we really actually think we do when it comes down to actual fire suppression. Does that make sense? That was a big story.
It makes it's the way you break it down and discuss it. It is simplistic in its delivery, right? There's a lot of information there. 160, 300, 600. Those are your numbers?
Yeah, those are our flow rates for East County.
Yeah.
We used to have 8 different flow rates on our engine. We had 2 inch, we had 2.5, we had 1 3/4, we had 1.5 inch on the bumper. We've got deck guns, we've got ram monitors. You know, like, It was crazy having that many choices. And what we found was the majority of the people would choose the 2 inch because it's the middle road. So, like, they don't want to choose wrong, so they choose the middle road. So, like, now I'm choosing the 2 inch with the 1 inch tip. And I've got 210 gallons a minute flowing at 76 pounds nozzle reaction or so. I'd have to look that up. But, like, now I'm to a point to where I can't. I'm sure you're right. Let's see.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, most people are going to go through the middle ground. You know, like, and if I get down to that point where I'm going the middle of the road every single fire that we have, you know, I don't really at 78. So I was pretty close. But I don't really have.
I told you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, like, if all we do is go the middle of the road, there's no really thought process in why we're doing what we're doing. We're just reactionary now. You know what I'm saying? Like, that dude doesn't know how to think. He knows what to think. And if I want to get somebody to know how to think, I got to break it down a little bit further than that.
It's that simplistic approach. I mean, it speaks volumes to, at the end of the day, to educate people about this job. Let's keep it simple. There's so much information, that you just shared, but you delivered it in a way that anyone can understand. That is what we need. We need more people to be able to educate our firefighters on, you know, pretty in-depth shit. I mean, you know, flow rates and building size and putting it all together can overwhelm people unless they're given tools to figure out how to do it in a simplistic nature. And you just did it. I'm so glad you went down that road. I absolutely love how you just put that together. And I also think, too, you're right. I think we got to take the options away. We need to narrow down our options and come up with 3 or 4 solutions that will do 100% of the work instead of providing 8 options.
Yeah. And there has to be a graduation, right? Like, there's a graduation in those flow rates. So, like, if I give you 8 different flow rates and there's only a 25-gallon jump in between them, like, what does a 210-gallon fire look like that's different than a 250-gallon-a-minute fire? You know what I'm saying? Like, what do those 2 fires look like? You know? So, like, I'm a big, firm believer in a graduation of flow rate. I like to double the flow rate. And that's why our 160, 300, and 600 are doubling the flow rate every graduation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, those fires actually warrant that graduation.
So the simplistic approach, hands down, really well delivered there, Kyle. I thank you for that. That was so good. What I'm just trying to think, your passion for the engine company, is it because that's what you knew and that's what it was when you, I mean, you guys, like you said, right? You guys were stock full of engines, but you obviously have to do all the work on the fire ground, but you must have had this initial love for the hose line and that nozzle position because, I mean, that's really what you go all in on.
Yeah, it's what I found I was good at. And I think we should all be passionate about what we're good at. You know, like, I've got no business teaching people how to vent roofs and, you know, how to trim a window. I can do it. You know, I can get it done. Sure. I've taught people how to cut roofs before, you know, but, like, I think that the fire service needs more people that stay in their lane. You know what I mean? And I've always tried to stay in my lane, and my lane has always been engine company operations. You know, like, I've got no business telling people how to operate on a 4-man engine or a 5-man engine or a 6-man engine. That's why my classes are all geared towards 3-man engine companies. You know, like, I've got no business teaching people truck work because I wasn't ever really good at it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, I wish more people in the fire service would stay in their lane versus trying to chase what's popular right now. And I think there's a lot of dudes out there chasing the popular side of it, you know, and I've always tried to stay rooted into the same message and to where that message can be delivered consistently and well to where people seek it out. You know, like, people seek out delivery. That's where most people go wrong, is they're trying to chase what's new and flashy in the fire service. And, like, people want good delivery. And if you have good delivery, then the message will sink that much deeper. And the whole goal of anybody who's teaching anybody anything should be to package it in a way to where they can leave your class and go deliver it. You know what I'm saying? So, like, they can deliver it to their own department, right? Like, every time I teach, and I love teaching hot way more than lecture. I had to be talked into teaching lectures, you know, but I love teaching hot more than anything. And I try to teach, when I teach hot, I give them the how, which is what they paid for. but what they get as a bonus is the why, when, and where. So like when I give you all the pieces of that puzzle, now you can go have a conversation with your folks at home to where it doesn't devolve into an emotional one. Now you can just hit them with facts and why we're doing what we're doing, adding context, specifically with my skill set. It's a one that's not delivered well the majority of the time, unfortunately, which is why people get lost in emotional conversations. You know, you tell a 30-year guy that he should be flowing and moving, you know, like if you change one word in that sentence from he should be versus you have to, you know, you have to flow and move. Now you're looking at a dude that spent 30 years of his career using hit and move. And you're telling him what you may be telling him what you think you're telling him, but what he hears is what I did for 30 years is wrong.
That's right.
And, you know, now you've got a wall and we're not communicating anymore.
Yeah,
so
really well
part.
said. I heard you say once, and I talk about this in one of my programs, is fact versus feeling. And, you know, what are we actually arguing? Are we arguing our feelings or are we arguing fact? And there's a lot of validity to that. I love the fact that you brought up teaching. I was going to ask you about this. A lot of times I see you sitting in the front row with a notebook out taking notes. And, you know, 20 plus years in, a lot of the guys that you're sitting in classes of, you've already taken that class before, and yet you find yourself sitting there as a true student again. Yeah. Why?
I mean, we should always be lifelong students. So in my opinion, every instructor should be a lifelong student. If you're choosing to deliver information to people, then you have to become a lifelong student if you're not already one, to be able to just add into the delivery of your information. And I've always enjoyed listening to other instructors deliver information and find those common threads, you know, because what we need is a unified approach in the fire service. And I think a lot of instructors, they try to find different ways to be different. And I wish that we would all just try to approach it in a simplistic manner, that we're all saying the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, if you were to listen to my lecture or Andy Starnes' lecture or Steve Robertson's lecture or Keith Stakes from UL, like, the funny thing about the truth is it sounds the same no matter who you listen to. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if we could just all start speaking the truth together, you know, we would be a unified front. And then at that point, the only thing that's different is the delivery of the information. You know, where we have conflicts, specifically as instructors on the circuit, is when we try to be so different from each other that now our messages conflict. And then now a student doesn't know who to listen to. You know what I mean? Like, now the student hears this from this guy and this from this guy, and he's on that edge trying to find out which camp he wants to be in versus us all being in the same camp. You know what I mean? And you can learn a lot. And just like skill set, you know, I always tell people all the time, you can learn a lot by watching people perform a skill. You can learn a lot as an instructor by watching people deliver information. So I wish more instructors would be more in tune with that.
That's really well said. And I think the other thing, too, I talked about this the other day it's actually been a popular topic on the last couple episodes when we're talking about instructors and training. And, you know, a lot of guys are delivering information that they might be regurgitating like you're worried about, right? But you in fact, have done the work. But really where the authenticity in a message comes from is you've actually done it yourself. There's so much importance to that because you can't go deep or teach or explain to a point if you've never done it before. And I think we have too many people out there that are taking risks in teaching where they haven't done the work themselves. And that's a scary thought.
You can usually sniff them out pretty well. You know, if you know your information, you can sniff out somebody who's regurgitating and doesn't really have a nice understanding. That's one of the main reasons why I like podcasts like this. Like, we never spoke about anything that we were going to talk about at all. Like, anybody can rehearse an hour of information. You know what I'm saying? So, like, and I'm not trying to call anybody out, you know, but anybody can rehearse 30 minutes of a delivery of a topic. You know, it's one of the main reasons why I like long-form podcasts like this, because you can really find out how people think and what really is inside their head when there's not a prompted conversation. You know what I'm saying? And that's tough for some people. they just regurgitate.
I've had more people ask me as the host on this show to push people further in their ideas, because a lot of times, I'm here to facilitate the conversation, but I've had a lot of people recently, I guess maybe some guests over time, I've kind of let them get away with a couple things that I probably should have pressed them on. And, and I think there's some validity to that. I have to weigh that myself, right? It's like, how far do I want to push this guy? So I'm starting to ask people to go a little bit deeper on their thoughts or ideas, because I really want to formulate their opinions too. And in fact, a lot of times when I push people now, they come away from it going, I never thought of it in that light. He goes, and hey, I thought, that kind of clicked for me at that moment. So it's been good. But yeah, I think I need to push people harder. I really do. I don't know. We got to make sure that the people that are talking about this job are the ones that should be talking about it. And I struggle with that at times, but I'm very much I very much believe that I stay in my lane, and my lane is to promote others around me and with solid messages. And that's why I wanted to have you on. I've admired your approach, your work ethic, your information. I know it's vetted. It comes from a strong place. I know you're still a student. I would challenge you to find that inner voice and start writing. I think you can bring a lot to the table, Kyle. I really do. So other than writing, what else is next for you? I want to kind of just start like putting this together and wrapping it with a big bow, man. What else is fueling you? Are you going after any specific topics right now that are just like lighting you up at night?
Man, I've tried to stay true to the message. Unfortunately for the American Fire Service, and fortunately for me, I don't see American Fire Service without cruel intentions being necessary. And I think I wish more than anything that my job would become, as an instructor in this particular skill set, would become obsolete. And it gets to a point to where the basic fire academy instruction is what's being delivered in the street. And I think we're going that direction. I don't know if maybe your listeners have already opened the fire attack chapter in IFSTA 8. You may be surprised. If you ever sat through my lecture and have read the fire attack chapters of IFSTA, you would see conflict up to this point. You know what I'm saying?
Credentialing. Then, I have, dude, I have it right here. It's hilarious you said that. It says credentialing, and then in quotes, burn it all down.
Yeah, for sure. And, I was a burn it all down guy for a long time, and it took me a long time, and having some adult conversations with people that I really respect. And then David Rhodes was one of them, is that we have to stop the burn it all down mind frame, because credentialing will never go anywhere. Right. It will always be a part of the fire service, and if all we do is just burn down credentialing, now we're at an impasse, and that's what kind of drove me away from the fire academy as well. I just got so tired of teaching the book, and I wanted to teach the street. And it's like, here's a brain buster. Why don't we make the book the street, right? Like, why do we put instructors in a position to where they have to teach you to the test? And if they have time, they can now teach you what happens in the street. But the majority of the American Fire Service doesn't have time to do that. So you end up leaving your probie program or wherever your credentialing program is with this much information, just enough to make you dangerous. And then you meet guys from the street and they're like, hey man, just throw all that information that you got out in the trash, and then we'll teach you how we do it in the street. And it's like, if you were to open the fire attack chapter in IFSTA 8 today, it was written by people who are in tune with the modern fire service. So like Keith Stakes had a lot to do with it. Right. I would have to say, and I'm going to limit some names on there because I don't know if they actually wrote versus just influencing, but you may be real surprised. If you go buy an IFSTA 8 book off of Amazon right now and open the fire attack chapter, you may be real surprised at what you see in there. And that's a big step forward into the credentialing program. And now we got to get into the search. We've got to get into truck work. We've got to get into everything there and just infiltrate. And that's what David told me a long time ago, was like, instead of being a burn it all down guy, be an infiltration guy. You have to infiltrate these organizations. And then thankfully the American Fire Service has infiltrated enough to where now the book is beginning to match the street. There's a long way to go, but it's a long process, but we're making strides with it.
And it's exciting to watch. You know, I used to say the subculture is now the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and we're making progress, and it's built on guys like yourself and others that refuse to back down, refuse to be apologetic to the information that you're providing. And it's coming from a place of authenticity. I think what's really interesting too, and I think about this a lot, is the next generation. You know, I mean, I grew up on the Chiempos, the Dugans, the Salkas, reading their information, and growing up, they were informal mentors of mine, of articles that I read and books that I have, and so on. And when you look at that, you think about the forward progression of the fire service, and who's that next generation? You know, who are guys that are bringing solid information forward, like yourself, Anthony Rowett, right? Like, there's guys out there that are of younger stature that have an incredible message to bring forward. And that's what we need to make sure that we're getting that, you know, that we're challenging those guys to understand, like yourself. And I mentioned Anthony, and there's a few others that, you know, I could pop off immediately with their names, but you all have so much to offer, and you are the next generation of taking the next step in the information being processed and given out. We have to be protective of that, man. Have to.
And it's funny you say that, because that's the same thing I hear from Chiempo every time I hear, you know, he's like, somebody's going to write the article, Kyle. Somebody's going to write the book. You know, it's going to be published. It's just dependent on the American Fire Service to determine who that guy is, like, and what information is published. You know, so thankfully they've got some pretty good technical editors, and they rarely let things through that aren't beneficial or aren't correct. But still, there's some stuff that gets through to some of these magazines that I read, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like, who read this and approved this? You know,
that's right.
But you can only do so much from the cheap seats, man. Like, eventually, if you don't want it written incorrectly, somebody has to write it. You know, that's kind of where I'm at in my mind frame right now.
I also think too, we need to go deep. Like, I'm kind of tired of everything being so broad in its approach, and so many messages, I read an article, and then I sit there when I'm done reading it and go, what did that tell me? Like, it's so broad in its appeal that I think it's almost like they want you to offer a more broad approach, so you're not isolating or affecting little groups, but you know, you're accepting all in the fire service. It's an end all delivery instead of going after a very niche market. And I think the consumer today, the average firefighter, is better educated than ever before. And I think the information we need to be putting out needs to be deeper, more specific, and much more narrow, because that's where I think you get the most growth and most impact. And I'm just tired of this broad stroke shit.
Well, I think a lot of that can be attributed to the shallowness of their depth of knowledge. You know, like a guy that's going to write an article that doesn't go as deep. He's just obfuscating the fact that he doesn't have a grand knowledge of that topic. You know what I mean? And I think that the FBI would call that a clue. You know what I'm saying?
I love that. Yeah, that's good. That's a really good way to put it. And I think you're absolutely right. But then there's the responsibility of the technical editors or the editorial staff or the publication to look at that and say, this doesn't work for us, right? And so on. I think we can challenge the fire service today. I think that, you know, I said it before, the subculture is now the culture. I think we have very educated people and younger people in this job that are into it, kind of like your upbringing in the fire service. I like to think that I'm right there too in a lot of ways with how I was raised in the fire service, to love it and protect it, and to educate yourself with it. And I think we're doing a disservice if we're not offering real hardcore information on the larger networks that people are paying attention to. And I think that's where you find this growth of Smoothbore Cartel and the Engine Company Resurrection, like, you know, in different groups that are out there, even National Fire Radio, right? Corley and Firehouse Vigilance. Like, people are seeking more information today. And if the big guys aren't going to do it, someone else will. Just the same advice they've given you about writing, right?
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. There's a lot there.
We just have to realize that if we want to change the course of the fire service, as a whole, then somebody's got to take the reins, because guys are retiring at a higher rate. You know, the instructors that are on the circuit are dwindling due to age, unfortunately. Like, it's hard to find a lot of these very strong mentors in the fire service. And now you're seeing instructors pop up all over the place, you know, and I'm one of those guys that's popped up in the last 10 years, you know. So, like, I'm talking about myself as well, is that we have to be really specific on who we give the torch to, you know what I mean? Because, like, somebody's going to take the torch, and it's like, who do we give the torch to? And is their information conflicting with everyone else's information? And if it's doing that, we should investigate why. You know, like, do they have a shallow depth, or is everybody missing the mark? You know what I mean? So, like, it's been fantastic over the last 10 years, for me at least, being able to read the NIST and the UL. And now I'm on the row home study for UL, so I'm getting a little more inside information on that side of how things are kind of gathered for those reports and how those reports are put together. Because they've got a bad rap, man. Like, when the exterior fire attack study came out, they got a real bad rap from the American Fire Service. And I think it had to do with a lot and how that message was delivered, and not necessarily the information in the report. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if they would have delivered it in a different way, or been very tight with who was able to deliver that information, I think it would have been received a little better, you know. And I really wish that they would have waited to get the interior fire attack study and the exterior fire attack study and put them out together, instead of putting out exterior fire attack first and then a sweeping change across the fire service. And it took guys like Aaron Fields and Dennis Laguerre and, you know, Ray McCormick, guys to stand up and say, hey, man, this is only half of it. Like, let's do the interior fire attack study as well before we start making sweeping change. You know, and then surprise, surprise, a lot of people had to walk back a lot of what they said after the exterior fire attack came out. And then the interior fire attack study shines the gold standard, being interior fire attack. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it just kind of blows my mind when you think about the simplicity of it. It's like, how could you think that exterior fire attack was gold standard in the first place? You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
It just kind of blows my mind. It's like, we transported, coming in the fire service in 2002, I, like, transported into a version of the fire service that I was fully encapsulated. So, like, it's really easy for me to make decisions based on my level of comfort now. You didn't have to tell a 1960s fireman when to open the nozzle. So, like, only difference between the 1960s fireman and the dude in his pajamas was the nozzle. Like, at this point in our career, it's easy for us to make decisions based on our level of comfort because we're fully encapsulated. And it took, like, some of the American Fire Service, it took the UL studies to bring them back to pre-SCBA to really realize what's going on inside the building. You know what I'm saying? Like, surprise, surprise. So it's better for the unprotected civilian as if we also operate as if we're unprotected, even though we are. And it's kind of hard for people to realize that. So it's been cool over my travels through to be able to see everything start going back in time a little bit. You know what I'm saying? So, like, if you're really into the information that's coming out now, we're going back to pre-SCBA tactics. Like, interior fire attack invented the air pack. The air pack didn't invent interior fire attack. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, like, it's like the chicken before the egg.
Yeah.
So it's been cool.
Really well said. There's so much that pre-SCBA tag. I wrote that down, circled it, underlined it. I love that. Really well said and put together. And frankly, delivery matters. At the end of the day, it's like 80% is delivery, man. If you don't have the right stewards of the message or the right way to get the message out, it will fall flat. And all that hard work and information that goes into it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
A friend of mine once told me 99%.
Kyle Romagus, man, I thank you. Yeah. I thank you, man. Thank you for joining me today. What a great conversation. There's going to be a round two because we're just scratching the surface, bro. I think you have so much to offer. I would challenge you to keep going and to think about putting some pen to paper. I think you have a lot to offer, brother. And I wish you tremendous success as you keep moving forward. And thanks for taking an hour out of your day today to join me, man. It was a great conversation. I hope, too, to be honest with you, I think we went in some places that Kyle Romagus doesn't really talk about on other podcasts or classes. So I'm glad we went to some of those places, man. Thank you.
For sure. I appreciate it, man. I'm humbled. to be able to be a part of the National Fire Radio family now. And I've watched you guys from afar for a long time, and I appreciate you reaching out. It's been fun, my friend.
Bro, man, listen, I got one job, right? And that is to put people on that I believe can make an impact to the fire service. And at the end of the day, you're a standout. And so I wish you continued success. Thank you for joining me. Hang out. Oh, where can people reach out? I know, listen, there might be some people that aren't really overly familiar with you on our channel. So where can people find you for more information, etc.?
Well, I've been permanently banned from Facebook, so you can't find me that way. But you can find me on smoothborecartel.com and Smoothbore Cartel Facebook and Instagram. You can shoot me a message through there. And then my email address is kyromagus, ROMAGUS, @gmail.com.
Awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that. And I would challenge anybody listening, if they have interest or inquiries. Cruel Intentions is the class that I got the hour and a quarter or hour and 3/4 version of a 4-hour class. But I would challenge you, if Kyle's teaching in your neck of the woods, it is definitely worth sitting in and getting a lowdown on that 4-hour class. It will make you think in a lot of ways when you leave there. So I can tell you that firsthand. So Kyle, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Stay right here. I'm going to sign off the podcast. I'll come right back to you, pal.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. What a great episode, man. We just scratched the surface today. Kyle Romagus, Battalion Chief out of East Montgomery County, Texas. Smoothbore Cartel, teaches across the country. His information is sound and it is solid, and I would challenge you, if you're not familiar, make yourself familiar with him. And for me, well, you know who I am. You come here and listen to my big mouth every week, but I thank you for tuning in. And like I say at the end of every single episode, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse and talk about it, because when we're talking about the job, we're making the job better. I'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.